There are evenings when silence arrives like a physical presence. It settles into the room with purpose, pressing against consciousness with a weight that refuses to be dismissed. This is not the gentle hush of contentment, nor the hollow quiet that follows exhaustion. It is denser, more intentional, as though existence itself has drawn a deliberate breath and held it, allowing the endless layers of daily noise to finally fall away. In that suspended moment, the mind begins to drift toward territories it typically avoids. Memories surface like old photographs developing in soft light. They are familiar, yet rendered strange by the passage of time and the softening of context. These recollections do not simply replay events, they demand engagement. They pose questions that daily rushing pushed aside, questions about decisions made hastily or deferred indefinitely, conversations that ended too soon, promises broken or quietly abandoned, and the people we hurt through action or neglect. On nights such as these, the heart becomes a mirror, reflecting both the quiet triumphs and the overlooked failures that have accumulated over time. There is an impulse to examine not merely what occurred, but what was permitted to pass unnoticed. The moments that slip past like water through open fingers, leaving subtle traces in the fabric of conscience. The mind wanders through scenes of conversations past, replaying not only words but their undertones, the hesitation before speaking, the energy behind statements made in haste or deliberation. This journey through memory proves uncomfortable precisely because it demands honesty. There is no audience to please, no need for self-justification, no performance required. Only thought confronting thought, and the self meeting itself without pretense. These nocturnal hours enable a form of reflection rarely accessible amid the demands of ordinary life. Not the superficial nostalgia that passes easily, but the kind that unsettles, that forces recognition of truths long avoided. The mind moves with intention now, searching for meaning in experiences often dismissed as insignificant. It weighs actions against intentions, outcomes against hopes, and the gap between who we claim to be and who we actually showed ourselves to be when no one was watching. The stillness amplifies everything. Each candle's flicker, each distant sound, each breath of wind through darkness becomes companion to thought. This quiet permits no easy escape, no shallow distraction to fill the void. And within that deliberate emptiness, attention turns toward others, not casually, not superficially, but with the weight that genuine consideration carries. Even the smallest gesture, the quietest word, the gentlest presence leaves marks that persist in memory, shaping understanding in ways the clamor of daylight obscures. Memory is not a passive archive. It does not store experiences neutrally like specimens in a museum. Memory is alive, interpretive, and carries judgment within its very structure. On nights when external demands recede and the mind stands alone with itself, memory transforms into something more demanding, a force that weighs the past with unsettling precision. It sifts through experiences, decisions, and conversations, drawing connections between actions and consequences, measuring everything against internal standards often stricter than any external expectation. Memory does not merely recall. It evaluates. It asks uncomfortable questions about what was done well, what was ignored, and what remained undone. When thoughts turn toward others during this reflective silence, the consideration runs deep. We remember not just events, but their weight, the significance of presence and absence, the impact of words spoken and words withheld. We recall gestures that passed unnoticed at the time, moments of courage or its absence, instances when trust was honored or compromised. These recollections carry moral gravity. They are not neutral records, but charged with emotion, significance, and often truths we have been reluctant to acknowledge. The mind tracks patterns in behavior and response, noting consistencies and contradictions, forming judgments about character that bypass the defenses we maintain during ordinary hours. Memory becomes a mirror not only of what happened, but of who we are, revealing the distance between intention and action, between our stated values and our lived choices. This process proves uncomfortable precisely because it is honest. It does not accept easy excuses or grant simple forgiveness. The recollection of negligence, the remembrance of selfishness or cowardice, arrives with moral weight that cannot be escaped. Yet alongside this burden comes clarity, the recognition of moments when action aligned with principle, when courage and integrity manifested despite fear, when care and attention shaped outcomes for the better. Memory in this mode functions as teacher, exposing gaps between aspiration and reality, while simultaneously highlighting the instances when we rose to meet life's demands. Reflection often centers on what might be called the architecture of regret. Regret rarely concerns itself with dramatic catastrophes. It lives in the overlooked moments, the words never spoken, the kindness delayed, the opportunities for honesty or reconciliation that passed unseized. These are ordinary instances, yet their omission or mishandling becomes moral markers that conscience cannot ignore. On nights like these markers acquire heightened visibility, standing out against the stillness and demanding contemplation about responsibility, choice, and the ethical dimension of ordinary living. Memory also shapes how we perceive both ourselves and others. When we reflect, we measure not only our own actions, but the actions of those whose lives intersected with ours. We notice how individuals influenced our path, the ways trust was extended or betrayed, the examples set by others, whether as templates to emulate or warnings to heed. In recalling these influences, we evaluate the significance of relationships, the depth of connection, and the lessons embedded in our interactions. Memory functions as both judge and guide, offering insight into character, pattern, and consequence. In the stillness of reflective nights, the mind does not simply catalog events and memories, it measures them. Comparison emerges naturally, almost inevitably, as consciousness seeks context for what has been experienced. This comparison operates not in the obvious register of envy or competition, but on a subtler, more insistent level. It is the internal weighing of expectation against achievement, of desire against realization, of the person we hope to become against the person we have actually become. The shadow self does not deserve fear. It represents the collection of all qualities, tendencies, and impulses we have suppressed or denied, the hesitations, compromises, and failures we prefer to forget. In quiet moments, this shadow becomes unmistakable. We see not only ourselves, but the version of ourselves we have avoided, denied, or abandoned. The contrast between the light of aspiration and the shadow of reality proves stark. Even when accomplishments are genuine, the mind lingers on what remains undone, what was mishandled, or what was left unexplored. These comparisons operate on moral and existential registers, pressing the individual to confront the full spectrum of their character. Reflection often turns outward as well, bringing others into sharper focus. Certain individuals stand out in memory not because they overshadow us, but because their presence illuminates truths about our own choices and patterns. They function as mirrors, reflecting qualities we admire or fear within ourselves. Sometimes they embody courage, integrity, or clarity, qualities we wish to emulate. At other times, they represent weakness, avoidance, or duplicity, qualities we fear becoming. This comparison proves uncomfortable because it is accurate. It bypasses pretense and points directly toward tensions between ideals and lived reality. It can awaken feelings of inadequacy, regret, or longing for transformation. Yet it also provides clarity about the direction we should take. This reckoning connects intimately with conscience, which does not measure lightly, but weighs the moral significance of past actions with precision. The quiet amplifies these considerations, rendering them impossible to ignore. It is not a night for distraction or denial, but for honest accounting. The fainter ethical and emotional discrepancies become highlighted against the stark clarity of silence. Even as comparison generates tension, it also opens doors to understanding. The shadow self, once recognized, becomes companion to reflection rather than source of fear, revealing what is possible, what matters, and where honesty must prevail. As the night deepens, these insights accumulate, quietly reshaping perception and deepening understanding. Comparison in this sense is not external judgment, but internal calibration, a measure of alignment with personal truth. The shadow self, acknowledged rather than denied, points toward growth, correction, and the possibility of change. The people who enter memory, who appear in thought during these hours, are not incidental. They are benchmarks, reminders, and sometimes catalysts for transformation. Conscience takes no holidays. Even when the world pauses for celebration, conscience remains awake. It does not rest with festivities, laughter, or decorations. It is a persistent observer, quietly measuring the alignment between action and principle, intention and execution, promise and fulfillment. On nights like these, when external demands soften and distraction diminishes, conscience grows more audible. It speaks not with malice, but with unwavering clarity, drawing attention to areas of neglect, avoidance, and moral compromise. In the stillness, conscience sharpens its focus. Every choice, however seemingly insignificant, receives examination in relation to its ethical and emotional consequences. Did honesty guide action when deception would have been easier? Did courage govern behavior when fear tempted retreat? Were kindness and generosity extended or withheld for convenience? We recall moments when fear, pride, or selfishness directed our choices, and conscience highlights the subtle costs of those decisions, how they affected others, how they altered relationships, how they shaped the trajectory of our character. The quiet of the night permits these evaluations to surface with intensity often lost amid daily demands. Conscience also brings attention to inaction, failure to act when action was needed, hesitation when decisiveness was required, avoidance of responsibility. These omissions carry weight as significant as overt deeds. Memory recalls not only times when we spoke or acted wrongly, but also moments when silence or delay caused harm. The mind measures the moral weight of what we failed to do as meticulously as it measures the consequences of what we did. This heightened awareness often extends outward, encompassing others as well. Conscience recalls the moral texture of relationships, trust extended or betrayed, support given or withheld, empathy shown or denied. In the quiet, these relational truths become starkly visible. We consider the ways our presence affected those around us, the ethical tensions in our interactions, and the patterns of behavior that define how others perceive us. Memory and conscience intersect here, producing nuanced understanding of influence, responsibility, and the ethical fabric of daily existence. Importantly, conscience does not reveal only failure. It also illuminates integrity, courage, and acts of care that may have gone unnoticed or underappreciated at the time. In reflection, we recognize where we acted consistently with our values, where we honored our responsibilities, and where our presence made positive differences. These quiet acknowledgments reinforce the capacity for moral agency and remind us that character is defined not solely by mistakes, but by the cumulative cumulative weight of right action over time. Conscience operates without prejudice or distraction during these reflective hours. It does not measure success by fame or external approval. Its metric is fidelity to principle, alignment with truth, and the courage to act rightly regardless of consequence. It is relentless but impartial, challenging us to confront both strength and weakness, accomplishment and failure, courage and avoidance. By bringing these truths to light, conscience offers the possibility of insight, self-awareness, and ethical recalibration. Even amid the weight of reflection, regret, and conscience's insistence, a profound possibility awaits, the possibility of renewal. This transformation is neither dramatic nor sudden, nor does it arrive as miraculous absolution from some external authority. True renewal begins quietly within the mind and heart of the individual. It emerges from acknowledgement, from recognition of past errors, and from the deliberate decision to align future action with truth and responsibility. On nights of deep reflection, this possibility becomes tangible because the distractions that normally obscure moral clarity have fallen away, leaving only the stark landscape of memory, conscience, and self-awareness. Renewal requires honest engagement with one's own history. We must look squarely at the consequences of our actions, the impact of our words, and the weight of our inaction. This is not indulgence in self-criticism, but precise, deliberate assessment of where life diverged from principle, where fear or pride guided choices, and where courage and integrity were postponed. The process of renewal also depends on recognizing our influence on others. We do not exist in isolation. Our actions, words, and presence ripple outward in ways often unnoticed, until quiet reflection brings them into focus. In considering how we have affected others through kindness or neglect, honesty or deception, courage or avoidance, we gain insight into ways we can contribute more positively moving forward. Renewal, therefore, is not only personal but relational. It emerges through acknowledgement of responsibility and deliberate intention to act with greater integrity and awareness in our interactions with others. Renewal remains inseparable from accepting imperfection. It does not demand flawless action or the erasure of past mistakes. Rather, it recognizes that human beings possess capacity for learning, adapting, and improving even when history bears marks of error. Awareness of past failure, faced with honesty and clarity, becomes guide for future conduct. It teaches discernment, strengthens character, and illuminates the ethical path forward. Renewal becomes active and ongoing, not static or conditional, a commitment to pursue alignment between intention, action, and moral understanding, day by day, choice by choice. In the stillness of reflective nights, this potential becomes vivid. We sense that the path of renewal is accessible to anyone willing to confront truth and take responsibility. The quiet amplifies the significance of small steps, subtle shifts, and deliberate corrections. Even minor adjustments in behavior, moments of courage, acts of honesty, and decisions to uphold integrity acquire profound weight. They are the threads through which character is woven, evidence that renewal is possible, and markers that life can move toward coherence and meaning despite past missteps. Renewal also carries psychological dimension, providing relief from the weight of unacknowledged error. It allows us to reframe our relationship with the past not as source of shame, but as foundation for growth. Recognition that we can act differently, respond more responsibly, and engage more consciously fosters resilience, self-respect, and renewed purpose. It reminds us that even within human imperfection, progress and alignment remain possible, that choices made today can redefine consequences tomorrow, and that the ethical landscape always remains receptive to careful navigation. Peace is not the absence of reflection, nor is it the avoidance of truth. It is the deliberate embrace of clarity that arrives when memory, conscience, and awareness converge in the quiet hours. On nights such as these, when the world is still and distractions have withdrawn, the mind possesses extraordinary capacity to perceive both the intricate patterns of its own existence and the ripple effects of its presence in the lives of others. In this space, even the faintest gestures, the quietest words, and the smallest decisions gain significance. Every act, whether intentional or neglected, becomes part of the larger moral and emotional landscape that defines character and shapes experience. The night encourages the mind to settle not into complacency but into honest acknowledgement, allowing us to confront what has been, understand what is, and consider what can still be achieved. The recognition of truth in these hours proves neither simple nor comfortable. It demands attention to the subtle dissonances between intention and action, aspiration and reality. We confront the consequences of choices made under pressure, in fear, or in ignorance. We recall moments when courage was tested, where integrity wavered, and where compassion was delayed. Yet even as the mind examines these discrepancies, it begins to identify threads of perseverance, integrity, and moral effort that persist despite imperfection. Peace arises not from perfection, but from the acceptance of responsibility, the acknowledgement of failure, and the determination to act with greater alignment in the future. It is the reconciliation of understanding and action, memory and insight, past and potential that forms the foundation of enduring calm. In this reflective quiet, we also confront our relationships with others. The mind traces connections, both profound and subtle, that have defined our experience over time. It notices ways in which others influenced our path, instances when trust was honored or broken, and moments when attention, care, or courage could have been greater. These reflections reflections remain measured and precise, highlighting lessons to carry forward rather than grievances to dwell upon. We come to understand that awareness and conscience are not burdens but guides, tools for aligning actions with values, and for ensuring that our presence in the world is conscious, deliberate, and meaningful. Peace strengthens through recognition that life is a continuum, not a series of isolated events. The past is neither final nor irreparable. It serves as source of insight, repository of lessons, and foundation for ongoing growth. Even regrets, examined with honesty, provide structure for wisdom. They reveal where attention was misplaced, where fear or pride dominated, and where courage or compassion could have been more fully exercised. These realizations do not produce despair but clarity, illuminating the ethical and psychological terrain through which life continues to move. The act of facing truth also opens space for calmness, because it removes the illusions that so often dominate consciousness during ordinary hours. When pretense and distraction fall away, we see clearly what we value, where we have fallen short, and what steps are necessary to move toward alignment with those values. This clarity fosters inner quiet that is profound because it is grounded in reality, not in denial or wishful thinking. It creates conditions for measured, intentional living, where actions are informed by reflection and decisions are guided by understanding of consequence, character, and responsibility. The night ultimately reminds us that forward movement remains possible. Awareness of the past, of memory, judgment, and conscience's insistence does not trap the mind in remorse. Instead, it frames the next steps with insight and intention. Recognition of error becomes guide for correction. Understanding of moral responsibility becomes compass for action. Acknowledgement of influence becomes reminder that life is series of choices, each with potential significance. In embracing these truths, peace emerges not as passive tranquility, but as active, deliberate state of being. The balance between understanding, accountability, and possibility, where clarity illuminates the path forward and conscience guides toward a life lived with alignment, integrity, and purpose. This quiet, reflective calm proves profound because it encompasses the totality of experience, memory, regret, hope, and intention, all coexisting in deliberate awareness. It is here in this careful reckoning that we sense the true weight and value of our existence, not through accolades or recognition, but through the integrity of thought, the honesty of reflection, and the courage to move forward in alignment with what is real, enduring, and true.